Ken Paxton was acquitted. Mountain of evidence against him. Clearly corrupt behavior, but he was acquitted in the Senate in Texas. He was not impeached, which means Texas retains its incredibly corrupt attorney general. Let's have a gander at what that means through the lens of our old pal Bo of the Fifth Column.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So
Howdy,
today
Bo.
we are going to talk about Texas and Paxton and impeachment and acquittal and what it all means. Okay, so what do we know? Okay, what we know is that Republicans in the House impeached the Republican Attorney General, and then Republicans in the Senate acquitted him. That's what we know. So what can we infer from what we know for sure? There is a huge split within the Republican Party. And that's mirrored nationwide. You have the far right party, the sedition caucus style party, and then you have the Reagan-Bush style Republicans. And they are not happy with each other. And this is now reflected in state politics. I would imagine that this is going to carry through to the primaries, to the election, all of that. If you have ever thought about getting...
Oh, I've spoiled it. There we are. So listen, I do want to pause for a moment and talk about the difference there between the what he calls the Reagan-style Republicans. I sometimes refer to as the GOP, short for Grand Old Party, which is an old nickname for the Republican Party. They really are the old Republican Party. It's like two different styles of bank robbers. The MAGA types, they are the kick in the door, gun everything down that moves, leap over the counter, stuff as much money from the under the counter as they can into a bag with a dollar sign on it, and then spray. What am I talking about? They wouldn't be that fancy. Into a dollar store grocery bag, and then sprint out of the building. They are irresponsible and short-sighted. They endure a ton of consequences for very little gain. And what they consider to be gain is stealing from you. However, don't get it twisted. Those Senate Republicans he's talking about that need to be elected by wider areas, they're just more responsible bank robbers. They're, the sort of people that slide a note over to the branch manager saying, this is your kid's school and we have someone outside there right now. Open the vault, please. And then they go into the vault and they take the big bills and they remove the die packs usually. And they wind up often getting away with it because they are professional crooks that are currently dealing with Mr. Blonde in their party. So that's the difference here. But understand that long-term, their goals are very similar. It's to bleed the country for as much as they possibly can. Really, it's to bleed the world using their position within one country. For as much as they possibly can. And if they happen to hurt people along the way, that gives them half a chub. So, that's who they are. But now, Bo has a message regarding the people of Texas. And if you're from Texas, I hope you'll listen to this gentleman.
Getting involved in Texas politics, all of that. If you have ever thought about getting involved in Texas politics, now is your time. Because there's going to be a lot of upheaval, a lot of score settling going on. There will be openings. But that doesn't tell us everything.
So the question then is why? Why will there be upheaval? And why was there disagreement over whether or not to impeach this guy. Did they see different evidence? Well, no. But they made different calculations about how their political futures will pan out, depending on the evidence that was presented. I'm going to toss it back to Bo for the remainder, but I just want you to be aware that we are going to focus on that again.
It comes to the behavior of Republicans and people looking at the impeachment as a whole. The two main theories that developed, one is there's something we don't know. Okay, most people took that to mean another allegation, or perhaps more proceedings of a different kind of nature dealing with Paxton. The other is that it's something personal. The personal one kind of fell apart, because if it was something personal, odds are the Senate would have voted the other way. It would make more sense for them to have voted the other way if it was something personal. So we're back to there's something we don't know. Whatever it is, we still don't know it. But we can gain a little bit of insight into the Senate with this. Whatever it is, they believe the average voter in Texas will not care about it. That's their position. That's what this vote means.
I do want to say I don't understand his reasoning here, and I welcome your input. If it was personal, I would think this is how they would vote. Like, oh, this is just personal beef between someone in the House or someone's in the House and Ken Paxton, and so we will vote to acquit. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't see why personal is taken out of the equation. That said, Jesus God, Bo of the Fifth Column knows his business. So I would go with his interpretation over my own on that particular. In fact, my interpretation is to say, let's defer to Bo's. But I just want you to understand that I don't understand what his reasoning is there. And again, if you believe you've got it, let me know, and I'll learn from you.
Or they view it in a situation where their vote will make it to where nobody cares about it. And they'll dismiss it by saying, well, the Senate investigated it, and they found he didn't do anything wrong.
Take the die packs out.
That's a possibility as well. But that's a big gamble, because it all depends on how the average voter in Texas views Paxton's actions. If the average voter in Texas views it as he didn't do anything wrong, this is normal politics, then the Senate votes are probably right. Nobody's going to care. But if the average voter in Texas looks at his behavior and says that's out of line, that's corrupt, or that's just not something we want, those senators who voted to acquit, they just co-signed that behavior.
As much as I would like to fantasize that we live in such a country where traditionally conservative voters will gather around and say, wait a minute, we have an actual moral judgment to make here. Nay, we have an ethical judgment to make here. No, come on. They will see what the Senate did. I think Bo correctly spotted this. They will see that the Senate acquitted him and say he didn't do nothing wrong. I don't know why I used that accent. That wasn't even Texas. But they'll say he didn't do anything wrong because there were no consequences. And we are a group of people which seem to judge things entirely based on whether or not somebody experienced consequences. This is how we can look at poor black folks suffering and think, good, everything's working out well, because things work out well for good guys and they work out badly for bad guys, so those must be bad guys. It literally is that simple for a lot of these folks.
And they may pay for it at the polls. At this point, we don't know. We don't know how this shapes up, other than it's setting a pitched battle between Republicans in Texas. That much we know. Everything else depends on the voters at this point. If more allegations surface, if more proceedings start, those voters, they may look at the Senate acquitting him on these charges and see it as, my senator can't tell right from wrong. Or they may look at it and say, these weren't real big things, not a big deal. This is just normal Southern politics. In which case, Republicans in the House may end up paying for it. The long and the short of this is, it's not over. The impeachment battle, the trial, all of that, that's not the end of this story. The end of this story won't really be told until the voters decide whether or not they think the behavior covered by the impeachment was appropriate, and whether or not they think the senators co-signed it, or whether or not they think the House Republicans were playing partisan games.
But, I think the biggest takeaway here is this. Woof. Well, listen, side note, if you're watching the live stream and haven't been able to see anything for the last few minutes, I'm sorry. It looks like we're having internet issues, but I'm going to plow on through because we are also recording this and I will upload it. The takeaway from Bo here is that whether or not the voters are swayed that Paxton did something wrong, the fact is there was not unity with the Texas Republican Party. The House went one way, the Senate went another. You can use that. Here's what I recommend you do. In particular, run for office if you live in Texas. It is a great time for that. There are going to be hurt feelings that show up in the voting booth that might not even be reflected in the polls. There is going to be a lot of hate that Ken Paxton spreads around to his enemies. And guess what? Even the normal voter interference that Texas Republicans try their damnedest to do, that's going to get watered down because they are going to be holding on to grudges. If you don't live in Texas, donate either money or time to progressives running for office in Texas in about 6 months. A little more. The start of summer next year. Have a gander at progressives running in Texas and pick one and join their team. Spend a weekend of time making calls for them, or send them $50. Start a swear jar right now, and understand that in the beginning of next summer, you are going to send the contents of that swear jar to a progressive campaign in Texas. We have a rare opportunity here in Texas to do a lot of things. One of them, a huge one, is going to be keeping fascists out of the White House, keeping the United States a democracy. But boy howdy, another one is actually, for the first time in my lifetime, putting competent leadership in Texas at the state level. It's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss. And I thank Bo for laying out the situation. Shame Paxton didn't get impeached, but c'est la vie. Or shame he didn't get tossed out, I should say.